Lovely to meet you, Pete. You're the CEO of Wordnerds. Pete, tell me all about Wordnerds and how this journey began.
So, Wordnerds teaches computers to read. And when I say read, I mean understand the meaning behind words. There's plenty of software that's out there that will count words and tell you which words are used most frequently and which words are used within certain numbers of other words, but actually understanding the context of language is a very different thing. And we're using a mixture of artificial intelligence, which is very new, very bleeding edge AI, and some very old corpus linguistics, some old linguistic techniques to feed into neural networks to teach computers to understand humans effectively, which is tremendously challenging, fabulously exciting, and hugely useful for all kinds of people. It started as a spin out from an agency. So a year ago, I was quite happily running a digital agency called Daykin and Story. And a few months previously, we'd gone to a challenge day that Nissan put on. And Nissan's challenge was around how they can get an early warning for problems with new cars. And they figured that if somebody had a problem with a new car, and they had a Twitter account, they would probably slag Nissan off on Twitter. And it became about how do you find the tiny numbers of people with problems with new Nissans in amongst all of the noise, all of the mentions of Leafs and Notes and all of their other brands. And we realized pretty quickly this was a diagnosis issue. How do you find people talking about problems with new cars as distinct from features of them? You can't just do a keyword search for brakes when it comes to a Nissan because you've just got too much noise. And I'd met a guy called Steve, who's a corpus linguist in a pub, and I saw some of the stuff that was going on with natural language processing, and basically put our heads together and came up with a very cobbled together spit and willpower kind of idea about what might happen. We pitched it to Nissan, and this whole mad journey began.
That's a huge change from the business that you were doing before what you're doing now. But I mean, that meeting the chap in the pub, it sounds very much kind of opportunistic. Is that how your businesses essentially come together and then manage to tackle some of the problems that you're starting to face in the sector?
Yeah, I think so. I think running a digital agency was brilliant. I learned a lot about handling clients and learned a lot of tech, and I built an amazing team of fantastically talented individuals. But there are a lot of digital agencies around, and there's a lot of work for them, and it's great, and there's some really good ones. But I was starting to feel that we sort of not got as far as we could. We were growing really well, and we were doing really good stuff, but it wasn't particularly exciting. And I think innovation happens at the intersection of disciplines, and where things really move the needle these days, whatever industry you're in, most things in that industry have been discovered, been developed. If you're in a mature industry, you're unlikely to disrupt it from within the industry with just the skills that you have. Where you start talking to external people or people with a different skill set or people coming to a problem from a completely different perspective, you're much more likely to solve a big problem or come up with something new. And that's certainly what we found. I'd learned about computers and had people that could access AI. But until we met Steve, who was sat in a dusty library at Newcastle University studying Victorian ghost literature, I mean, the most opposite thing you can find from tech and AI. But until we met him and until we realized that we could feed all of that amazing stuff that he knows about the structure of language and syntax and how words work together, until we realized we could flow that into the neural networks and train computers to know the stuff that he knew, we didn't really see the opportunity. So yeah, it was a really sort of opportunistic thing. It happened by accident. It was never part of a plan. We certainly didn't plan on closing the agency down. We just thought this was an interesting side project that ended up getting so much traction that it ate the agency. And we had some really difficult, this time last year, we had some really difficult decisions to make.
So we come across a lot of people that talk about AI, and we come across a lot of people that haven't really got a clue about AI, but like talking about it. What is AI, and what is genuinely happening with AI?
It's a great question. So I guess dictionary definition of AI is something that you would expect a human to be able to do that a computer can't do, or something that you wouldn't expect a machine to be able to do. So I think the definition of AI changes all the time necessarily. So a pocket calculator, when it first came out, was AI. You wouldn't expect somebody to be able to do advanced arithmetic in seconds, or a machine to be able to do that when that sort of happened. Nowadays, we're kind of bored of calculators. We understand how they all work, and we wouldn't think of that as AI. There are specific things that have happened more recently around deep learning, and particularly around neural networks. And there are different classifications of AI that involve effectively computers making decisions in a very similar way to the way that a brain makes decisions. So computers are structured in a way that they're broken into lots of different bits, and each different bit tries different things to work out a solution to something. And that's with computer power getting better and better, and the advances in that neural network stuff. That's the stuff that we're using to really supercharge some of this linguistic stuff that we've got, and to be able to process multiple things at the same time in a way that is possible now in sort of 2019, 2020, that just wasn't possible 6 months, a year, 2 years ago, because this confluence of computer power and the software and the ability to do it just wasn't there. So you're right that a lot of people, it's a buzzword. These things kind of go around in cycles. I think, 6 months ago, everything was blockchain. Now everything's AI. We see a lot of things that people are saying, oh, this is AI. And it's like, well, it's not really, is it? It's counting. You've invented counting. So it's stuff that you've got computers making decisions that human beings wouldn't be able to make in the time that a computer can do it, based on a set of parameters that you've fed in, or some training data that you've put in. And it is already here. It's already doing things materially that make a huge difference to loads of businesses in loads of different ways. I think the difference with Wordnerds is, hitherto, when people have spoken about big data, they've mainly spoken about numbers. We like numbers. We kind of get them. We know what they are. They're unequivocal. Words are a bit more complex. So young people use them in very different ways to old people. We have wonderful regional variations. In this part of the world, we have a whole different vocabulary to other parts of even our country. Even within the Northeast, there are dialectical variations in the way that people talk about things. And with things like sarcasm and irony, you can literally have people meaning the opposite of what they write. And trying to work all of that out using AI is a fascinating and scary prospect.
So with your software, basically you're saying you're able to pull out or analyze many forms of linguistic in terms of the semantics of how it's all pulled together in different sentences and different use in Twitter or other feeds. How can that be used? You're saying financial services, but can this be used in any sector at all?
Yeah, I mean, the more we do this, the more we realize everybody has words. And so we've started in industries that are regulated, like the water industry and the rail industry, because they tend to have somebody with a big stick behind them saying, if you don't sort your complaints out, you're going to get fined lots of money. So there's a really palpable ROI there. And things like rail companies, there's lots of people, there's a problem with the train. Twitter lights up with people. Nobody ever goes on Twitter and goes, hey, LNER, your train arrived bang on time again. Thanks very much for that. But as soon as there's a problem, people talk about it. So there's a freely available data source that we can tap into. So yeah, lots of different people can use this. Necessarily, the people with the most data are most interesting to us. I mean, that tends to be the biggest companies. So it's the large organizations, and that's where we've started. And in terms of the things that we do, I guess there's three main things that we do. First is finding stuff, so finding specific things in big data sets. And the thing that we can bring to this, because we understand context, is it's not just a keyword search. So traditionally, if you want to find somebody talking about a train being late, for example, you might put in late trains and see what comes back. But you might say, my train's late. I might say, oh, my train's delayed. Somebody else might say, my train's not here. All three of us are using different language to express essentially the same thing, and our AI will cluster all of that stuff together and treat that as one thing. So regardless of the way that somebody chooses to express themselves, it can find the people who have the same problems, and that obviously has loads of different uses, whether that's finding leads or problems or people who think a certain thing or people that you want to speak to because they enjoy a particular pastime or whatever it is. So that's the first thing, finding stuff. The second thing is, once you found those people, what are they talking about? If you're a train company, are they talking about delays or problems buying tickets or how nice the cakes are in first class? And then thirdly, what do they feel about that? So what used to be sentiment analysis? Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they angry? Are they annoyed? Are we finding problems that are a very small problem for everybody, or is it an absolutely huge problem for a tiny subset of the customers, but maybe that problem makes it unusable for them? So that's the overall usage for it.
Could you talk to us about, in terms of the tools and the people you have internally that are actually developing essentially the tools for your business? What type of people have you got in the company, and what other resources have you got available with the likes of Google, others? How does it all form a picture to solve the problems that you're trying to tackle?
Sure. So I think one of the advantages and challenges that we had is morphing from an agency into a software as a service company, is that we already had a room full of really talented people that we'd cobbled together over a long period of time. And one of my great regrets is, unfortunately, the needs of a SaaS business are different from the needs for an agency. We had to move a lot of those people on when we closed the agency, so not all of the talented people we worked with could come to Wordnerds. You just don't need a designer if you're a SaaS company. You can buy that stuff in, and there's not enough work for a person to do it. Ditto some other roles. But what we did have was we had a great software development team, developers that had worked together and knew how to work together, front end, back end, technical people who had very little understanding of AI when we started. But the thing about good technical people is they're curious and they teach themselves and they're always learning. And even just running an agency for 10, 15 years, from where we started off in the early 2000s to last year, we saw the mobile revolution, we saw responsivity, we've seen all kinds of changes, and people have had to keep themselves up to date with new tech. That's a standard thing these days. If you're in the tech industry, you're relearning all of your skills every 3 or 4 years. So it was really easy for them to make that leap, and they've worked really hard to do that. And they've learned about both linguistics and AI on top of all of their software stuff, which has been hugely impressive to watch and really gratifying to see, and an absolutely fantastic journey. In addition to that, the thing that agencies do really well is the customer-facing stuff. You're dealing with multiple clients, things are changing all the time, it's a chaotic environment, and you end up with people who are very, very good at reading people, managing people, understanding people, caring about them, empathizing with them. So we were able to take a lot of our client-facing team into a sales capacity or a product management capacity, and again, it's a slightly different set of skills, but skills are transferable if you've got the talent and the ambition to do it. And they've picked that up amazingly well. And we have a small function of somebody to do the finances and a small marketing function, which obviously from the agency stuff was really easy. So that's basically it. Our business is basically a tech team that builds the product, a customer-facing team that sells it and looks after those products, and me who sits in the middle and basks in the reflected glory of all of their genius and hard work.
If we go even deeper again, thinking into the guys that are actually doing the software development, how are they actually? You talked about developing a data set with the linguistics. In terms of the mechanics and the tools that they're using on a day-to-day, how are they managing to actually make the whole AI system work for you here at Wordnerds?
So we're old enough and ugly enough to know what we don't know. And one of the massive gaps in our understanding when we started this was AI. We're very fortunate in the Northeast that we have 5 top quality universities within a stone's throw of wherever we are. And we have been doubly fortunate to have been so well supported by Sunderland University and the AI and machine learning department there. There's a professor there called Chris Bowman, who's an amazing guy and total floating brain in a tank genius type guy. and he's been fantastic with us. And also Nora Al-Mubayed at Durham University and their AI machine learning department. And actually, before we closed the agency down, our second hire was a PhD student that we're part funding to go through Durham Uni. And he has been, a chap called Dean, he's been absolutely instrumental in exposing us to new technology, signposting us to things that we had to read, looking at the way that we've been doing things and finding better ways that then our guys can learn about, and basically acting as a conduit between us and the most up-to-date thinking that's coming out of academia at the moment. And I think that's been an absolutely vital part of our product development certainly over the last 6 months. Our product has come on leaps and bounds because of it.
Will yours be a words company?
I don't know. I think so. Yeah, I think humans are always going to use words. Organizations are always going to have lots of words floating around them and inside them, and that those words need organizing, and people need to use them to build business cases and understand what people's staff are saying, what people's customers are saying. So I think Wordnerds will always be a word company, clearly. Yeah.
Not image nerds or...
No, I don't think so. I think running a generalist agency for a long time was brilliant for loads of different things. So keeping skills sharp, it was really interesting. 1 minute you're dealing with a client in one space, the next minute completely different client. You're getting your heads into loads of different business cases, and you're meeting some amazing human beings, a diverse group of people. But it's really hard to grow a business where you're spread so thinly across lots of different verticals and disciplines and doing different things every time. I think with Wordnerds, there's a lot of stuff on the market that does how many likes this has and how much this has been amplified, and just the quant data around social and around the way that people articulate themselves and all of that kind of thing. And we're definitely not that. We just want to get really good at understanding humans through the words that they use. And other people can do all that other stuff around it. And even if we're just the engine that does this and we pump it out to loads of different platforms, we want to get really deep into this and get our stuff first in English and then in other languages really great at that side of things. And I think if we achieve that to any kind of degree of, anything approaching kind of perfection or as close as you can get to it, I think that'll have been an amazing journey. And I'm sure at some stage somebody will come and either close us down or buy us up or something like that. So that feels like the future for Wordnerds, yeah.
Just picking up on that point of startup and funding, we will interview many entrepreneurs who like 100% ownership, who will say, I can do this on my own, I don't need the support of others. But you touched on those other partners from the early days. Do you think if you had your time again that you could have done it off your own back, or do you think they were absolutely essential?
So firstly, different businesses are different, and I think it's absolutely possible to run a particular type of business where you're the 100% owner, or a group of people are 100% owners, and there's no external funding, and you do it from revenue, and that is a perfectly legitimate way to run a business. And for people doing that, all power to their elbows. I wish them every success. I think software and tech is very different. The stuff that we have at the minute, you can't buy from any of the other providers in our space. Our stuff is ahead of what they've got. Certainly, we haven't seen anything that does stuff better than what we do. They are all better funded and better resourced than we are, and it is only a matter of time until they have what we have and then overtake us. So right now we're out in front, and it is incumbent on us to get further ahead as quickly as we can. The more of the market share, we're not going to be the world leaders in this in the long term, because there's too many clever people in the world and too much money that people will invest in other people in different parts of the world to do it. So the best we can hope for is to get out as quickly as we can, and then either by virtue of getting more of the market share, attract much more funding to stay ahead, or somebody who has got some deep pockets will want to take us out of the market because we've got the tech that they want. And then there'll be lots of other opportunities for us in that kind of environment. To do that, you have to have funding. And when I left uni and I moved to the Northeast and I kind of did my thing for a few years, when I decided I wanted to run at the time, an agency, I was young and foolish and arrogant and thought I was perfectly capable of doing this on my own, in sweet isolation. And I kind of, I wanted to be the hero of my own story and I wanted to do it all myself. And I did. And it was great. I had an amazing time. We built the business. We did really well. And I wish to God I hadn't. I wish to God I had invited as many people as possible in on that journey with me, learned from loads of other people, got people cleverer than me in loads of different ways involved, joined somewhere bigger, and then run my business afterwards, because it would have accelerated what I could have achieved in that time. And I think that's what I've learned from doing. I'm a lot older and still as foolish and probably still as arrogant. But as I said before, the thing about investment isn't just the money. The thing about investment is access to great humans who have experience in this and can teach you rapidly the things that you really need to know. And also just a sounding board to bounce an idea off, and a wise head, and just sometimes somebody to put their arm around your shoulder when you've had a bad day, or encourage you in ways that you need as a founder or a co-founder or as somebody kind of running this journey. And it's stuff like, we showed something to our board a couple of weeks ago. It was the stuff about the tests relative to some of the stuff that's out there. So I had this little slide saying, this is what Google and IBM Watson and things like that achieve, and this is our stuff. I showed that to my chair, Stu, and Stu said, yeah, I saw that the other day when you showed it in the board meeting. Obviously, it's bullshit. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, that's bullshit, isn't it? It's kind of, you've done something, you've done your own tests, all this kind of. I was like, well, yeah, we have done our own tests, but it's true. He said, well, no, if it's true, we need to be getting on a plane and taking this out to San Fran because this is a really big thing. And it's kind of like, is it? And it's like, yeah, it really is. Do you stand by these figures? And I'm like, yeah, we totally stand by these figures. Okay, different data set, it'll vary slightly, but it's pretty much there. And he's like, right, okay. Right, well, let's get this corroborated. Let's get an independent person to do these tests, and then we'll get that, and then let's talk about strategy for taking that to market. And they see opportunities in things that you don't really think about because you're in the detail of it all the time. And having some people who are incentivized and to grow the business along with you, and have the knowledge that they've got and have been through it a few times before is hugely valuable and much, much easier than the alternative, which is doing it all yourself. So, like I say, for our business, that feels like the right thing to do. And certainly since taking the raise in June, the acceleration that we've had between June and now has been unbelievable. We are a completely different operation, and it would have taken us 2 years to have covered the same ground that we've covered in 6 or 7 months. And that in the tech game is, in 2 years' time, we're obsolete, right?
What about the mistakes, Pete? Is anything going wrong?
Oh, everything. On a daily basis, yeah. I mean, we're learning all the time. Every day is a school day. The whole inception of Wordnerds, the whole demise of Daykin and story. I have huge regret about being halfway through a journey with a great set of people and actually taking a different path, knowing that a lot of these great people wouldn't be able to come with us. Happily, great talented bunch. All of them got really good jobs within a ludicrously short period of time. With the importance for businesses in the Northeast to find great talent, it's a great time to be looking for a job if you're a talented techie person. So that assuaged my guilt somewhat, but I made loads of mistakes around that. There isn't a graceful way to close an agency, and I hope that we did it in the least ungraceful way possible. That's probably the big regret that I've got. In terms of mistakes, yeah, we make loads of mistakes on a small level every day, but that whole lean principle of fail fast and learn from it and move on. Mistakes aren't always bad, and I think making mistakes is an inevitable part of going on a journey with the velocity of our journey. We're making it up. Nobody's done this before. No, the specific stuff that we're doing right now in this part of the world, nobody's done that. There isn't a template for doing it. So of course we're going to make mistakes. And you've just got to learn from it, be honest and open, put stuff in place to not do it again, and bounce on to the next thing and make your next mistake.
Does it matter that there aren't necessarily enough software guys on the market that have these AI skills, or do you believe they can be taught?
That remains to be seen. So I think somebody once said when they recruit, they're after swans, so smart, willing, ambitious, and nice. They're not bothered about skills. Everything else can be taught. And I think there is a degree of truth in that. I think the rate of change of technology means that even if somebody is super qualified right now, in 6 months' time, the stuff that they know about now has been superseded by something else. So actually, what we're after is smart, willing, ambitious, nice people who are interested in staying ahead of technology and learning. And it's that capacity and thirst for learning that is more important than the skill set that they have when they come in. And I think that's what we're going to be looking for. We're going to be looking for people who want to learn. And it's a really exciting proposition for us to meet those people, but hopefully it's also a really exciting proposition for those people to come into a role where, regardless of their skill set previously, and there are clearly some things that we need them to have been able to have done, they've got an opportunity to learn some amazing tech that nobody else has at the minute and take that forward with us over the next few months and years.
How will you look to engage with other companies over the coming years?
We believe strongly that the Northeast needs a tech ecosystem where companies talk to other companies and help each other out. And actually, one of the joys of the Northeast tech scene at the minute is that it is really open. And we said, right at the start of this, innovation happens at the intersection of disciplines. And already we're finding great local companies coming to us going, oh, that's really interesting what you're doing. We've got this problem here that we think you might be able to help us with. And we're looking like, oh God, yeah, that would be a really good application for this, or just something that we can just help them with, just to kind of to give them another little string to their bow, or something else that they can do. That's already happening, and it's already started, and it's really interesting. At the same time, the opposite of that's true as well. We're going to need, as we grow, we're going to need the help of lots of other businesses, and where possible, we want them to be local businesses, and try and bring some people along with us if we are lucky enough to grow. That's definitely something that we're going to want to do.
There's definitely a lot of people who are scared of AI. Do you think there's an education piece for business leaders to understand what problems can be solved by a company like yours or otherwise?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of stuff spoken about the robots taking over and all of this kind of thing. And if that happens, I'm absolutely fine because I'm on their side. No, I'm kidding. This worry that AI is enabling kind of some sort of evil robot takeover thing is understandable. I think what's interesting is we are using AI to teach computers how humans communicate. And actually what our stuff does is allows you to express yourself however you want, and allows a computer to understand how you're expressing itself. So it almost allows you to be more human. If you think about things that people had to do with surveys in the past, where you have to say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate this? That's for no other reason than, at scale, there isn't an easy way to say, what you think about this, because if you write what you think about this, there's been no way for people to understand that at scale. So you have to say, well, this is a 7. Now, what does that actually mean? Whereas now you can say, what do you think about this? Oh, I think that's rubbish. It's too expensive. Or I think that's amazing. It's a great color, or whatever it is that you like or dislike about it. You can express it in any way that you want. And AI facilitates that humanity. Are there risks with it? With any new technology, of course, there's risks. Are there potential elephant traps around identity and where the law is on this? Where you've got technology moving faster than the law, you've always got potential problems, and it is incumbent on us as people developing this technology to act in a moral and responsible way until the law catches up with it and this stuff can be regulated, which I'm sure it will do ultimately. I think people are right to be concerned and vigilant about it, but I also think the robot takeover is possibly not quite on the horizon yet.
So what do you think will happen with AI in the next 5 years?
In the next 5 years, I think the application of AI to more and more complex and coordinated data sets is really interesting. So one of the things about AI is being able to process the data. The other thing about AI is actually it's only as good as the data that's going into it. And I think a lot of what's happening at the minute with open data and people in certain industries coming together to form these great repositories of data that people that are layered and all different types of data that then this AI can chew through to find patterns in things that humans just wouldn't be able to understand, will allow us to do some amazing things. I mean, you've just got to look at the way that already in the health sector, computers are better at spotting specific types of problems, particularly from pictures, than doctors, because a doctor in his or her lifetime will see, 120, 140,000 cases and then die, and then the next doctor's starting from scratch again. Computers don't suffer from that. They have continuous learning, so they can see millions and millions and millions of sets, and they just keep getting better and better and better. And I think we're going to get to a point very rapidly where things like the medical industry completely transformed by AI. We all have cars now and drive our car. 5-10 years time, how long until autonomous vehicles really get to our streets? Now, again, it's not going to be without its problems, but in the world of autonomous vehicles, who needs a car anymore when you can just call one on an app and it comes around and picks you up and takes you somewhere? What does that do to public transport? Our region is in the process of coming up with a 15-year transport plan. And what an exciting opportunity for them to be looking at that now. What will be available in 5 or 10 years' time, all controlled by AI, all automated to a certain degree, that makes things that you just can't do now possible. So if you're in a rural community in the middle of nowhere, you can't justify running a bus there necessarily, but actually autonomous vehicles could come and pick you up and take you out on a scheduled or on a by call way. There's so many opportunities for this stuff. It kind of feels with AI like it felt in the late 90s when sort of the internet started to become a thing. And I remember the first few times I saw the internet and all of a sudden the penny dropped. I was thinking, oh my God, like this is incredible. And certainly now I speak to my kids about mobile phones and the internet, and they're like, what was life like before these things? And explaining to them when you went to meet somebody, you had to go to Central Station and sit under the scoreboards at Central Station. If their train was late, you would sit there for like an hour and you didn't know if they were coming or not and all of that. And this is like not ancient history, right? I know I'm old, but this is a couple of decades ago, a bit more. And it feels like we're at the same jumping off point. I think life will never be the same again, and in 10 years' time we'll look back and think, oh my God, that was another crossroads, and do you remember when we used to do this stuff manually and all of that kind of thing? And yeah, that's going to be terrifying and exciting in equal measure.
Absolutely. Peter, I'm naturally very excited about Wordnerds and where you're going as a business. Tell me, if you weren't doing Wordnerds and weren't scaling an amazing AI and linguistics business, what would you be doing instead?
I think the practical answer to that is I'd still be running the agency. It was, you know, it was a great agency and it was going places and we were growing. If I wasn't in the whole tech scene, I think as a business owner, I would probably be, working for something like the local enterprise partnership or the council or something, trying to coordinate, facilitate some of this stuff. I think the Northeast tech scene is really special. It's got some amazing individuals. We're not as far on as other parts of the world. We're a work in progress. We're a small region, which is on the one hand a challenge. On the other hand, it's an opportunity because we can coordinate activity in the region in a way that other people can't. And I think if you look at some of the stuff that people like, you know, the guys from Campus North, the Ignite guys, the digital unions, the Dynamos, the LEPs, the Sunderland Software Cities, there's a bunch of really great people out there who are doing amazing things in tech and coordinating this ecosystem. And I think if I wasn't doing this, that's probably what I would be doing. I'd be in some way involved in that and helping out with that, because I think that's a really useful, interesting, and worthwhile space.
Pete, it's been so insightful. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Good.